This episode is presented by Playback, the Canadian film and TV industry's top source for business news and analysis. Visit playbackonline.ca for industry updates.
Canadian film and TV is at a crossroads. More talent than ever, but fewer doors open. How do diverse creators cut through the noise, get their projects greenlit by the decision makers, all without compromising the culture integrity of their story? On the DOV Elevate Podcast, we sit down with two guests who strategically navigated the pitfalls, the breakthroughs, and the mountaintop moments. The industry is shifting because culture isn't just a backdrop. It needs to be the lead. And it's time this industry treats Canadian stories as the rule, not the exception.
I'm your host, Vanessa Mitchell, and I'm also the producer of Banff Special Programs. And today, I'm with two men at the forefront of the cultural movement in Canadian film and TV. Writer Kaveh Mohebbi and actor and creator Arnold Pinnock. Welcome to the DOV Podcast, guys.
Thank you.
Pleasure to be here.
All right. So before we get into talking about your projects, which we'll do a bit later, I actually want to start at your origin story. So what was your first story you ever told that really, gave you the feeling that you could do this as a profession? Arnold, let's start with you.
Well, it's more along the lines of regurgitating a story. I remember as a young kid, me and my cousins at the top of the steps, listening to my Jamaican mother and father and uncles and aunts talk about Duppy stories, which Duppy is like ghost stories. And, as I got older, I realized they were more than just ghost stories. They were tale. They were telling values. And they scared me, they excited me. But, every Christmas when everyone got together or every Thanksgiving, those stories would, they tell them again. And they just had so much weight with me. And like I said, as I got older, I realized that they had more texture to it. And they were actually informing me about who I am and where I come from and the stock in which I am built on. And for me, when I first started doing like stand-up, all of my stand-up was all about my family. And yes, there were jokes and laughter in there, but for me, it was more about like, here it's new country called Canada, and we still are bringing these stories from back home, from where my parents originated from in Jamaica, and they still resonate to me then as they did now. So that's for me, the origin story is all about ghost stories that my parents used to tell.
I love that. Yeah. Kaveh, how about yourself?
Yeah, just listening to Arnold explain, it's funny how often storytellers do relate the stories we heard from our mothers or our parents. Just the kind of lineage of hearing from your family, the tales that inspired you to tell your own stories. It's very similar to me. Going so back, there's a joke version of this that is true that I used to watch Ninja Turtles as a kid, and very early before I could write, I remember asking my cousin, I wanted to write my own episodes of Ninja Turtles, so I would draw them and dictate what I should happen in this episode. So I was at a very early age wanting to write and be included in that creative process. But I think once it really kind of connected to me as something that could be part of my profession was, my mother is a cinephile. She loved movies. She was a natural storyteller, and just kind of adapting and evolving from the tools that she had sort of ingrained in me and how to look at the world. And, specifically with getting to the point where getting interested in politics and finding that there was a harshness in the reality of nonfiction, and me wanting to dilute talking about important things, but through a fictional lens, kind of really helped me realize there's power in storytelling. You could talk about important things through something that might be a little bit more accessible or at least a little detached from the harsher realities. So, the first thing I'd done in this short story writing competition was I remember looking at a picture of Stephen Harper, who at the time was the prime minister, and I told a story entirely from the point of view of his tie. Like the tie, what if that tie was a sentient tie having to live around Stephen Harper's neck and engaging in the strange policies that he was bringing forth through it. So in that humorous way, I was kind of talking about Canadian politics, but through something abstract. And I thought, this is something that could stick for me.
I love that. That's amazing. Well, talking about getting into, the love of story. First of all, congratulations, because Late Bloomer is in its third season.
Thank you.
Yes. That's a big thing.
Very proud of it.
Yeah, and as you should be, because it's very hard to get past even first season. So in the Canadian industry, we all know, and not because the story isn't good, and not because the content isn't good. So, again, congrats. So as an Iranian Canadian, being a writer on the show, how did you approach getting into a story that is so deeply rooted in someone else's lived experience? And, what does it take to honor that authentically in the writer's room?
I think finding the connection through a culture that isn't my own didn't initially seem, at first it would seem like there'd be a greater gap and a void there. But, in getting to know just Meet and talking to him, he came from immigrant parents who had traveled to Canada, I think before my parents did. But it was, again, going back to the universality of stories. It was so interesting to see how much of the immigrant experience transcends culture. It's not necessarily that he's Punjabi Sikh and I'm Iranian, but it was, we were newcomers in some way. Both of us were naturally born Canadians, but we came from family members that weren't. And that was sort of the unifying thing between, I know exactly what it's like to have parents that don't understand. They've made a great sacrifice to come to this country, and they've given up a lot of themselves. And with that comes expectations for you to be something more than the artist who wants to pursue his passions in acting or writing or comedy. Those things were the foreign aspects to our parents. And it goes against every culture. It's like you could be Chinese anywhere in the world, and it's like you understand the thing of like your parents are like, we didn't sacrifice and risk everything for you to learn clowning and miming in school. And there was something funny in that. And by the time you start talking to people who aren't from your culture, you were like, yeah, we're a lot more connected than we thought we were. And comedy just ultimately becomes you can break barriers through that, and finding a communication and common, having a common sense of humor about these things just made the writing process that much easier, because we were laughing before we were thinking of story.
So it's like even connecting on the immigrant experience,
Exactly.
So not just the race and country.
Yeah.
Okay, well, for Arnold, I'm going to swing it over to you. It wasn't a change necessarily for you in race and being Canadian for the Porters, but it's definitely a shift in the period. A Black man, Black community in the dawn of the 1920s in Canada. So what was that process like for you to get into that headspace?
For me, one of the biggest things was I wanted young people to know that the very streets that they walk today in Vancouver, Calgary, Montreal, Halifax, wherever it may be, Toronto, that, 10 feet down, there these men and women, flourished, fought against the impossible odds. And I just thought sometimes we just don't see ourselves in period pieces in Canada. So if they could see themselves, they could have stock in that. So that was one of the big things for me, was like, how do I showcase history through these porters that will empower, young Black men and women now to go, wait a second, we have stock in this country. We are woven into the very fabric of this country. And to me, and also inspire them to find their own roots, like you were saying about, the Iranian culture, and to be, it's okay to talk about us as individuals, as immigrants to this country, and to tell those stories, because I truly do believe just that there is a universality of it all, that brings us all together, be it from Ireland or be it from Jamaica or be it from Iran. We all have that story. So for me, these men and women that came from the Caribbean, came from the United States, and even parts of England, coming here, and it's like, wait a second, we got to work So we got to take the jobs that probably other people did not take. My father did that. My mom did that. My mom worked at the nursing homes. My dad worked, the construction and so on. Everybody's got that story. And for me, it's like, but what do you do with that? Once you've got that, where do you go from there? And you're so right in the sense of like, for us as artists, that's the last thing our parents wanted us to do. They want us to get the factory job or be the doctor, or be the, the lawyer, whatever it may be. But when you're, I'm the youngest in my family, when you're absorbing all of this heritage and you find an outlet, it's almost, you feel like I have to tell these stories. Like I have to get them out there. There's an obligation. And I think when you find like-minded people like we have here, like all the people that are going to Banff and so much more, it's so inspiring because it's not easy going up against the wall every single time. I was very blessed and fortunate to bring together an amazing team to do the Porter, but it doesn't stop there. Just like our parents, they woke up at 4:30 in the morning and took the bus and went to, work and then came home and in some cases did other jobs. So every time I feel a little tired or like, I can't do it, I always think of my mother and father, and that empowers me to keep going on.
That is amazing. And it's so funny, on our last episode, we were talking about, how important it is to find your people in this line of work. And truly, Arnold, you did bring people together. You found your people. And if you look at the team, Anne-Marie, RT, all these, Marsha, all these, you truly brought together some great Black Canadian talent, whether behind or in front of the screen. And it's also very empowering to see that happen. And it's so funny that you also talk about, both of you talk about your parents kind of being, going into the arts, but it is also such important work because, something like the Porter, it isn't just for younger people to see. It's even for a Black Canadian like myself, who was, born and raised here. Sometimes it's the first time people are hearing it because we did it. Sadly, we didn't grow up hearing it in our history books. It's Harriet Tubman and Martin Luther King, which are great, but like that was it every year. So such important work that you both are doing for sure.
I didn't know that. It's one of the things that I'm telling people, because I always get it back this way, like, oh my God, I did not know. And I'm like, no, I didn't know.
Why?
I had to do.
And why?
Yeah. And that's why, but there's also a point where you got to get at where you're like, okay, I'm beyond the why. I'm doing it now. Like, okay, I'm not blaming anybody about this. I'm just going to go do the work, So that's where I'm at.
Phenomenal. Is there any chance we'll see a season 2? I mean, Top Boy came back after a few years.
You never know.
Okay.
That's all I can.
Okay.
But the beauty of it is, you talk about the Anne-Marie and the Marsha Greens and the RT and God bless his soul, Charles Officer. Ronnie Rowe, Olanike, is that through that show, we got to put a huge magnifying glass on all of these talented people. I won't name any names, but, we had people in wardrobe. It's the first times ever doing anything, on a Black show. It was there, and we got them their permits. There were people in makeup or in hair that we brought in. It's their first time. Now, some of them are award winners. Some of them have been able to put their kids in college. They're on their 15th show now. So to me, that is success. Because if this whole thing about the Porters is about a union, right? The first of its kind, right? So that the next generation can be the doctors and lawyers, which is exactly what we happened, the Lincoln Alexanders of the world and so on, right? Then that's what that show did. And that makes extremely proud when I see RT Thorne, is, potentially going to clean up at the CSAs, and so Marsha Green is just killing it. And so is Anne Marie and all the other people as well, too. So, Jordan Oran, like all these people. So to me, I get a great feeling out of it, even though the show only did one season.
Yeah. And it's creating this ecosystem in a way. It's not just, okay, we're seeing Black actors in the forefront, but again, behind the camera and building people up, So yeah, just absolutely phenomenal.
I know we'll move on, but I just wanted to say, I can't tell you how fantastic it feels on the first day of shooting when you have 60 extras. You've got all this Black talent in front of the camera, behind the camera, a train with smoke going up in the air. And you are going back in your mind, going to upstairs with your cousins, looking down at your parents, telling these ghost stories and going, oh my God, how did I get here? What is good? That's the feeling that you get.
Wow. That's making me a little emotional because I'm sure it is an amazing feeling. And thank you. Thank you for pushing through for so many years, to make this project. Because like you said, it changed a lot of careers and trajectories for people. So, and those of us that watched it as well, truly, truly amazing to see ourselves reflected authentically, even if it's a period piece, So just, yeah, phenomenal.
Thank you.
I think I want to actually, in terms of us, wanting to tell our stories, it kind of leads into this next question. And there's this real tension in the industry between telling your story on your own terms and making it marketable enough to get it funded or greenlit and distributed. So what is the line for each of you? How much do you bend before it stops being your story? And Kaveh, if you could.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the greatest challenges of telling our stories authentically is knowing how to perfect that line, like finding that line, and it's never going to be the same twice, like depending on who the network is, the producers are, the broadcaster, your creative partners. I think if anyone knew the recipe to get it right every single time, then they're just going to pave their way with gold. From my experience, I've found it rather difficult to tell the stories that feel authentic to me because they can get to a certain point where I've sold it to a streaming service, for example, and it eventually doesn't get the green light. And sometimes through that process, the feedback I get is, we ultimately didn't know how to sell your show. Or they give notes to me that feel like they need to walk on eggshells in order to produce the show. And it seems to me like if this story is coming from a personal truth that I've experienced through my perhaps myopic lens, but it is an authentic voice to my Iranian culture, I should be the one to weigh in on whether or not that is something we need to walk on eggshells on or speak truth to power, for example. And sometimes when the executives don't see eye to eye, they get scared. And I feel like I've seen, at least thus far in my career, the shows that feel most authentic to me haven't gotten that green light yet because of that apprehension from the people at top, which I understand. I mean, the people at top don't owe me anything, and they could have a million reasons for ultimately not greenlighting a show. But it is a delicate dance of finding, yes, I'm willing to compromise to make the show, but at the same time, I have to be working with people who are willing to listen and willing to perhaps take a back seat to the creative storytelling process if it's something that I feel is a story that hasn't been told yet. So it's difficult.
Banff World Media Festival thanks its DOV Elevate partner, the Disability Screen Office. DSO develops opportunities for disabled creatives and advocates for a more accessible Canadian screen industry, setting a new national standard for inclusive, bilingual, disability-led screen-based storytelling. Learn more at dso-orphe.ca.
Why can't we live in that tension, though, to make a show? Like, why can't it be that sometimes there is this apprehension, but learning from the creator who authentically is coming from that culture? Why do you think we can't coexist in that and kind of move forward? It's
I mean, there's certain, there's a hand wavy explanation that's also the Canadian system that the Canadians might be a little bit more apprehensive as an industry to tell those stories. I don't think that's wholeheartedly true. Although, when it comes down to like governing bodies funding your projects and there's only so much to go around, there is a sort of onus on the people making decisions to play it a bit safer in Canada, whereas outside maybe in Europe or in the States, there's a lot more money out there, and it's a lot more things can be privately funded, and therefore privately funded by people who are willing to take greater risks. And to say one is necessarily better than the other, who's to say? That's an entirely different discussion. But there is something to be said that at the end of the day, there are people in this industry who would maybe be risk adverse and they want to follow a trend that they've seen worked in the past. And to be the first to do something might give them cold feet. Perhaps this is just my perspective on it. It might not be a universal truth, but it's from what I've experienced.
And Arnold, has this been your experience?
Well, I mean, obviously I did the Porter. I was blessed to do that. And that was a risk taker. But, sometimes I kind of think if we think of Carney's speech that he did in Europe a couple of months back, in the sense where we're in a place right now, Canada, and where we got to start working with other countries rather. And I think that's same way in the sense of film and television for us as minorities, because we come from different places. I was born and raised in England, you know what I mean? My parents are Jamaican, you're from Iran. So, so for me, it's like we've got to start, if we want to tell our stories, we can reach out to those countries and see if they would like to do co-productions with us. I mean, that's the beauty of Banff, I think. It's like we can get these meetings with people that maybe we wouldn't normally get the chance to get those meetings with, that can understand and can see those perspectives that we're trying to tell about the stories that we are so passionate about. Because I think the one thing that travels well is passion. Why should I put money into you if you don't even got the passion for your own project? And I think what's about you, I think it's a organic thing that you can showcase to people. And then the second thing is you got to put the work in. Right. So the writing has to be such that it is, there's a connectivity that makes sense for it to be a co-production. And then the last thing is like, hey, man, as Dave Chappelle says, we get paid for the attempt, man. You know what I mean? Like, you can put in all that work and it's still not work. But that's what we do. That's why we got 10 more in the bag ready to go. You know what I mean? Because it depending on what's happening in the world, this may be in fashion or that not be in fashion. It's like, this is not an easy gig that we decided to participate in. So we got to be prepared for the lumps that come. But if you love it enough and you're willing to go through, a little bit of fire, it can reward you.
So maybe sometimes it's not waiting on Canada, at least to be the first in, and going for it.
Because if you go overseas and you sell something overseas and they're like, oh my God, that's amazing. And now you come back to Canada, they're like, hallelujah, where have you been?
Yes. Which, is good and bad. Because then sometimes you get the whole, you bring it out and then folks are like, well, how come no one in Canada has picked it up? So sometimes there's some of that, but yeah, and it shouldn't always be, we've taken it out, it's been a great success there, and then Canada's like, okay, we're on it now, but just got to keep, I guess, pushing and going for it and finding a way, right? There's no one right way. Okay, so sticking on the topic of culture, we'd love to start to just talk a little bit about your projects that you submitted for DOV 2026 and Kaveh, your feature, Night of Fight, Émeraude. And could you give us a bit of a synopsis of the feature and what it took to create it?
Yeah, I mean, the thing that's exciting about this is it was sort of it kind of was born out of this thing I'd seen on Instagram about Muhammad Ali's last professional televised fight being in Iran. And this is when he was actually technically already retired. So we're talking 1993. And it was serviced as sort of this like goodwill mission. Muhammad Ali being Muslim, he was trying to bridge that sort of gap between the US and Iranian relations. And I was like, damn, that's really cool that, this part of this amazing man's legacy, his last televised fight being in Iran. And how often do you get a chance to write a sports story that takes place in Iran? So sort of flipping down the lens, I reached out to a director friend of mine, Alex Iskandarkha, who is Afro-Iranian. And I was like, man, how about we develop this project together? My pitch is two 11-year-old boys, Afro-Iranians growing up in Tehran who idolize Muhammad Ali, finding out that they get a chance to see him fight live in 90s Iran, where you're not going to get anything like that. Like Michael Jackson was banned, Madonna was banned, but anything that was cool in popular culture was banned in Iran. But now Muhammad Ali showing up to this fight in Tehran, and these two boys who worship the ground he walks on, to see what honor looks like in somebody deciding to take one night out to sneak out of their house, break curfew, skirt the law, sneak into a bus and travel to Tehran to witness this one man's fight. I'm like, that's got a cool coming of age sort of one night fight, the fight for seeing, respectability, and the fight for seeing honor, and the fight for seeing someone who stands up for what's right. And it was one of those scripts that it's probably one of the fastest first drafts I've written in a long time, because it just made sense to me to tell a story taking place in Iran about what it looks like when someone believes in what's right at a time when everything feels so wrong. So, I mean, working with Alex right now, it's been an exciting process, and we're both producing it. He's directing it, and it's something that I think it you can see like the festival, potential for something like this, and based on a true story. So, Night of Fight is something I'm really excited about.
And as you should be.
Thanks.
When that project came across, the adjudication, just phenomenal. People were blown away by the story, and the end of how to get into that story as well, and then the cross culture, with it. It's absolutely amazing, and it definitely needs to get made. All the projects, obviously, that are in DOV, but then for Arnold, yes, tell us about your project, Kimmel Park.
Well, my project, like you said, is called Kimmel Park. It's about the soldiers coming back from France after World War I, and they were all put in this place in Kimmel Park, waiting for boats to come back from Canada to take them home. And while they're there, they run out of rations. It becomes freezing cold. They don't have coal, and all of a sudden, a lot of distrust amongst the soldiers starts happening, and unfortunately, a bunch of race riots are starting to happen. But in the middle of all of that, there is a terrible killing that happens. And it turns out to be not just one, but 1, 2, 3. And our hero, Norval, is a Black soldier from Nova Scotia. And he bonds together with a Welsh bomb lady who was working in the ammunitions during World War I to solve this crime. And at the end of all of this is you have this massive race riot, which is the biggest race riot in British history that happens, with Black soldiers, white soldiers, and also British Black civilians. And at the end of it, of course, our hero comes through and saves the day. But it's another period piece. But to me, it's when I found out about this, I couldn't believe it was actually real. And we're working with a Welsh production company right now to because it's in development right now.
And that's amazing in the sense of what you mentioned earlier in terms of going outside and working, co-productions, international co-productions to make your projects happen, which is amazing. And that seems also like a natural co-production because it's natural within the story. That's amazing.
Even the Welsh production company, they couldn't believe that story existed. They had no idea.
Yeah. So it's educating other people too on the other side of the world. Okay. In terms of Kimmel Park, though, just to stay on this, Arnold, how is because you're also a phenomenal actor. And how has that informed you as a screenwriter?
Wow. What I love about being an actor and blending the two is all about character. Why does a person do what he does? What's his background to get there? So a lot of time as an actor, I was asked, why? Why am I doing this? Why am I picking up this cup? Why do I think this way? And I think when you start that from the writing aspect of things and you build this character that is three-dimensional, and then you can give that to an actor, it's like a dream for them. So I try to write for actors, so that when they get their character, be it the lead or be it, the day player, is that it's a full meal. So that's the way that I like to position myself when I'm writing, is what would I love to do? It might be a selfish way to think about it, but in the sense, it's like, I just want to give actors the full, like 4-course meal.
It's interesting you bring that up, because I find that's very evident in The Porter. Like, even some of the characters that, you wouldn't necessarily call the main character or there's so much layers to those, I guess, secondary or even third kind of characters. There's so much layers within their story. So I think that's what you can appreciate a lot in The Porter, actually.
Yeah. Green and Émeraude, like, we got to give them a lot of credit as showrunners, because they were writing what they knew as well too. Yes, these characters, quite a few of them came from me, and they're based on people that I know. But I think collectively, we just wanted to give people the product that we would love ourselves to do, that we would want to see. We spoke in patois. Like, when do you see that? There was no dialect. There was no, caption underneath saying we're saying this, we're saying that. We talked about, ashy arms and ashy. Oh, you can't go on the street like that. What are people going to say about me if they see you with ashy ends? We talked about stuff like that. We talked about in between light skin and dark skin. Like, these are real subjects within our community. So that's what I'm talking about, regardless of, in Kimmel Park, we're talking about that aspects. Why did these Black men go to war? Well, they went to war because within their communities, pastors were going around saying, we need you to sign up, because if you go for war, when you come back, you'll change everything for all of us. And that wasn't the case, but that was the belief system. So, and also for some of these men, you got 3 meals a day. Some of these men were starving, We haven't even got into the aspect of Black Cross nurses and why they wanted to go over there and do their part as well. So those are the sort of stories that we're talking about, which I think are very relatable. And the fact that we, it's an how do I put this? You have different races that come together to solve a problem because they can relate, as opposed to fighting amongst themselves. They're like, wait a second, there's something that needs to be taken care of. Let's come together and solve that. And that meant a lot to me. I was like, okay, that's Canada in my mind,
Yeah, and I think you so touch on the fact that, those, the ashiness or the colorism, like, that touches on why it's so important that it needs to be authentically told from those that are from that community. Even if others are wanting to jump on the story and help and they're not from that, like, no stories told without us kind of thing. It has to be so deeply, I think, collaborative if you're coming from the outside of someone's community to tell that story, or, told. Even the Jamaican accent, the patois that you brought up, is so funny because, and maybe I'm sure you can relate to this, is years of like hearing Jamaican dialect, particularly in American content, and it not being authentic and it sounds awful. So again, it's just nice when you get to watch The Porter and it's like, okay, this is actual patois. Like, you know what I mean? But you have to know and be within the community to know that, right? It's not just a pass.
You know what's so interesting about Canada is, let's just talk about Toronto. It's like you go to, Albert's on St. Clair to go get some West Indian food. You're lining up with South Asian guy. A white Canadian. You're lining up with everyone. This is the beauty about our country, is that everybody, everyone can basically say hello or thank you in so many different languages, and that's the thing. So when we talk about authentic people speaking in patois, everybody knows it. We're Canadian, man. That's just how we roll. So I think for me, that is a beautiful aspect that we can show the rest of the world. London, England is very much like that. And, when we talk about the stuff like the patois, the ashy hands, all that, I'm like, okay, is there an Iranian aspect of that? It's like, do they have their own version of things that
absolutely.
And I'm like, I don't know about that. And then once we learn that, doesn't that not bring us, I'm not trying to make this a kumbaya moment, but doesn't that make us curious at least?
Yeah,
Absolutely,
and connected.
Yeah.
And connected and human,
Yes.
Yeah, it really does. All right, well, both of you, have spent your careers centering and obviously of what we've talked about, centering around stories and voices that the industry has historically overlooked. What do you want the next generation of Canadian storytellers to understand about what culture actually does on screen? And Kaveh, we'll start with you.
I think the greatest challenge that most Iranian filmmakers have in the 21st century is knowing that there's other Iranian artists out there doing it. I think one of the things I've only recently really understood is that there were so many Iranian filmmakers, actors, writers, producers kind of doing it on their own in a bubble, and we didn't have a sense of community. And it wasn't until recently that we've sort of found each other and started forming a community of like filmmakers getting together, creatives, and just working together on projects. And I think one of the most important things for all Canadians to know, but also especially the next generation of Iranian filmmakers to know, is we're out there. And I think you need to do the due diligence yourself, but find your community, find your people. It doesn't have to be strictly Iranian, but if you want to tell Iranian stories too, don't feel like you're alone on an island. Find the people who want to tell similar stories. Find allies in your community, and know that there's a larger community out there than you think. Don't get stuck in your own little bubble. And I think it's just the beginning now of Iranian storytelling, at least in Canada, to finally get some shows out there and movies. And I think we're out there. So just watch out, because we're coming.
Mm-hmm. Love that. Arnold?
Well, I just want to piggyback off the sense of finding that family, so to speak. For us with the Porter, one of the first conversations we had was with Sphere, Jennifer Kawaja, who has a history of telling stories of people of different nationalities. And I think once you find your family, your unit, your team, it's like, don't take that for granted. And also, I think for the future generation of storytellers, have no fear, man. Like, just go for it. Be, unapologetic. Tell the stories that you want to tell. Because sometimes, for me, it's about the journey as opposed to the end result. It's about what you're feeling that you are doing. Yes, we all have to pay our bills and so on and so on. And, I get that. I'm not trying to make this to be like, some sort of Disney moment, but you have to enjoy the process. And if that means being authentic to what you want to say or how you want to say it, you got to do that, regardless of who the gatekeepers are. That's what I pray and hope for the future young brothers and sisters out there that want to tell their story.
Beautifully put. All right. Well, we're going to end off with one last question, because Banff is coming in a few weeks, and we're all going to be together in the Rockies. Very excited about that. What are you guys hoping to achieve when you get to Banff?
I mean, hanging out with Arnold would be a pleasure, face to face. Some of the other people in the program, and just getting to one of the best things about Banff, I feel, is it's one of the few opportunities to get general meetings with people who are decision makers in the industry, but it's not under the confines of a strict and measured, serious sit down. I feel it's a little bit more relaxed. The atmosphere is beautiful. You get to hang out on the patio, and it's a little bit more lighthearted and fun. And I think that's one of the main takeaways out of the Banff experience is meet people, make connections. Don't worry if you haven't left Banff selling a show or selling a movie, but you never know. Some of those contacts you made might pay off in dividends down the road. Just make the most out of it in terms of having fun and meeting cool people. And that's what I'm most excited about.
Amazing. So true. It's a lot more chill for sure.
Yeah.
Arnold, what are you hoping?
Well, right back at you. Like I said, I put the invitation out before we even started this podcast, my man here. I would love to sit down and really learn. I feel really inspired just hearing about your story and about your upbringing and also how similar sometimes it is, which I really love. Man. But I am also looking forward to connecting with people within Canada, but also outside of the opportunities that you have put forth, the hard work that your team has done to provide us with these unbelievable opportunities. I'm going to take advantage of as many as I can. I don't take this lightly that I am one of 10, and sleep will, whatever, man. I'll sleep when the sleep is really done. But the chance to also, as a Canadian, showcase our stories to people outside of Canada, like that's it, man. Like what a blessing, man. So I feel very, very blessed to be a part of this.
Amazing. And we feel the same way. We're super pumped about this 10. And you guys are our first inaugural 10 for this, DOV Elevate, elevation or evolution, I should say. So yeah, we're very excited about your projects, and we really believe in what you all are doing and your careers and everything you've put into where you are now. So it's an honor for us. So right back at you in that sense, and it's going to be great. We're gonna have a great time. So those of you that are coming to Banff, producers, studios, anyone that's coming that wants to link up with Arnold or Kaveh, please check out our BanffXchange, and you can arrange a meeting with them if you'd like beforehand. But yeah, they'll be around. So connect with them at Banff. And Kaveh, Arnold, thank you so much. This was great.
You.
And yeah, you're welcome.
This episode of the DOV Elevate Podcast is presented by Playback and is an extension of the Diversity of Voices Fellowship presented by Banff World Media Festival. If you're a mid to established level producer, director, or writer who identifies as Black, Indigenous, or a person of color, the Diversity of Voices Elevate program was built for you. DOV Elevate connects exceptional Canadian screen industry talent to the global stage through Banff World Media Festival. Pitch your projects, meet the decision makers, accelerate your career, elevate your voice. Learn more at BanffMediaFestival.com. All links mentioned in this episode are provided in the description below for video and in the show notes for audio.